It's easy to make mistakes when you're purchasing a home, so it's important to know the buyer mistakes that are most often made and how to avoid those. So today what we're going to talk about is prepping to purchase a property. And things we're going to focus on primarily are budgeting, getting pre-approved, shopping for both the house and the mortgage, understanding what's in the purchase contract once you find a home, and what happens when you're ready to close on that property. So let's talk about budgeting. Budgeting sounds pretty easy, right? You know how much money you make, you know how much money you spend, and you have an idea of where you want to be on a monthly basis when it comes to the monthly payment on the property that you're going to potentially purchase. So things you want to know is you want to know what you're currently paying in rent. You might want to know utilities, your car payments, credit card payments, student loan payments, right? You want to take all these things into consideration. The lender, once you speak with one, is going to focus primarily on what's on your credit report and of course ask you what's any possibly non-reporting debts might be, whether it be child support or alimony, or maybe you potentially just purchased a new vehicle that's not reporting to credit yet. Those things are important. But what we're talking about right now is your personal budget, because what you qualify for with a lender doesn't necessarily always align with what you're comfortable paying. So you want to budget for yourself to get an idea of where you're going to be comfortable on a monthly basis after you've looked at what your current monthly expenses are. Now, you also want to budget for your down payment. If you're a veteran or you're looking to purchase in a rural area, well, there's no down payment required. But if you're an average home buyer, you're going to want to plan to have a down payment on a property. So as a first-time home buyer getting a conventional mortgage, you need to budget for at least 3% to use toward the home purchase. If you're going to do an FHA mortgage, whether you're a first-time home buyer or not, you're eligible as long as you're buying a primary residence. You need to budget for 3.5% to put down. But you want to know before you speak with a lender how much money you're comfortable and you're going to set aside, or if you're getting that money as a gift from family, whatever the source of the down payment's going to be, you want to know that up front as you're budgeting for a home purchase. You also want to be able to determine what you can afford as far as the monthly payment. So that goes back to knowing what your other monthly expenses are. So once you determine what your existing monthly expenses are and what your monthly income is, well, now you want to determine how much you're comfortable paying on a new property on a monthly basis. So you're going to just play with the numbers and say, okay, maybe I'm paying $2,000 a month rent right now. I'm comfortable paying $2,000 a month on a home I own. I'm actually maybe comfortable going to $2,500, right? That's an example of budgeting and determining where you want to be on a monthly basis. But like I already said, what you're comfortable paying monthly and what you qualify to pay monthly don't necessarily always align, but come up with your numbers first prior to speaking with a lender and then work from there. You also want to factor in any closing or post-closing costs that you're going to incur when you buy a property. So you determine your down payment. You're going to have closing costs when you buy a property. And if you want to know more about what to expect when it comes to closing costs, please watch my video that breaks down in details what closing costs are on a property so you have a better understanding of what to expect. But you want to know that there are closing costs, have a general idea of what those might be on top of the down payment for your property. You also want to factor in things such as any moving expense you might have post-closing or any other expense you might incur when you buy a property after you close. And then you want to factor in any future home maintenance. We know you're going to buy a property, and even if it's brand new, it's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be things that need fixing or updating in that property. You don't necessarily want to leave yourself with no money in the bank when you close on a home, knowing that there could be potential things that come up post-closing. We as lenders call the money that's still in your bank account after closing reserves. Now, we don't necessarily require you to have reserves post-closing, but it's still recommended to have those. And for you as a home buyer, it just gives you peace of mind knowing that you have money there for a rainy day. Now, getting pre-approved to buy a property would be your next step. That means you're going to be speaking to a lender or lenders to find out what you truly qualify for when buying a property. Now, something that happens with a lot of would-be home buyers is they decide to go get pre-qualified. Now, getting pre-qualified might be acceptable to some realtors and sellers, but in reality, most sellers and realtors want to see that you're pre-approved. But I'm going to explain the difference. A pre-qualification is essentially made up of you having a conversation with a bank or a lender discussing what your home buying plans are. It would usually include a credit pull, but that lender or bank would not require you to provide any documents to support the information you gave them over the phone. So if you told the lender that you make $60,000 a year, they're taking your word for it that you make $60,000 a year without actually verifying it. And not that you're going to be lying to the lender, right? We know that's not the case. But what could happen is maybe you feel that you make or think you make $60,000. This most often happens for self-employed borrowers. But once you provide a tax return or proof of that income, it turns out that you might actually make less because you had deductions in the case of a self-employed borrower. Or you say you make $60,000, you send your documents over, and it turns out that you're 1099, you're not W-2. Well, that's also considered self-employed. And when you're 1099 or self-employed, you have expenses, as I mentioned, and your taxable income is going to be lower than what your wages actually were that were brought in, right? So a pre-qualification, the long and short of it, is that it doesn't hold as much weight during the home buying process as a true pre-approval because nothing has been verified. A good way to look at it is if you went to the doctor because you thought your arm was broken and you just walked in and the doctor threw a cast on your arm. Well, how did they know it was truly broken without doing an x-ray? A pre-approval is more thorough, and a pre-approval is the doctor performing the x-ray on your arm before putting the cast on it. It's going to be the same conversation you had with the other lender to determine if you were pre-qualified. However, you're going to provide documents to support the information that you discuss with that lender. So if you said you made $60,000, once again, you're going to provide tax returns or W-2s to prove that you actually make that money, right? Along with pay stubs, bank statements, right? All the necessary documents that would be needed to pre-approve you to buy a property. The good lenders will take it one step further and actually take that information and run it through the underwriting software that's used to issue a credit approval for you as a buyer. Because that's going to hold so much more weight when you go out in the market to find a property than just a brief conversation you might have had with the lender before they issued you a piece of paper saying you're pre-qualified for such and such amount of money. You also want to know that you're pre-approved because when you put a deposit down on a property, that deposit is at risk if you get denied for a mortgage once you're under contract. So you want to keep those things in mind. Getting pre-approved is a little extra work for you on the front end, a lot of extra work for the lender on the front end, but if they're willing to do that extra work for you, it's in your best interest and it's for your benefit as a buyer. Now, once you're pre-approved, it's going to be time to go house shopping. So what you need to do, well, you want to find a realtor. A buyer's agent will represent you as a buyer, help you find the right property, and they'll be compensated by the seller. So you're not even going to pay this buyer's agent directly to help you find a home and get to utilize their expertise in the real estate industry. You likely have a day job. You're not going to be on looking for homes on a regular basis or have the ability to look at homes on a regular basis. You're going to provide your wants and needs to your realtor so they can set you up on searches to look for properties that meet your needs. If you say you want a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home in a specific city, they're going to make sure that you're seeing all the 4-bedroom, 3-bath homes in the city that you're interested in without you having to constantly go online and look for those on your own. They'll be coming right to your email in most cases if the realtor sets you up on the proper searches. So that's going to make things easier for you, but you need to create a list of all the things you're looking for in your future home so that they can do their job properly for you. Now, once you've found the right home, you can do some mortgage shopping if you're not 100% satisfied with your original lender you spoke with. You have a window of time, 45 days as a matter of fact. It's called your right to shop window, where you can actually have your credit pulled by more than one lender to determine which one is going to offer you the best possible terms. And when I say the best possible terms, I'm referencing the interest rate and the cost from that lender. Now, if you want to learn how to shop lenders effectively, make sure to watch my video that teaches you some hacks on how to compare and shop lenders for the best possible terms. But once you're out shopping for lenders, you're going to look at things such as the reviews that those lenders have online, right? Not just the rate that they're offering you, because what if it's a lender who has a terrible reputation that's offering you the best interest rate? But when you read the reviews, they have a bad reputation because they never deliver on the lowest rate that they're telling you, right? Those are important things. So you're going to want to look at reviews that those lenders have online. You're going to want to make sure that you're comparing all the options effectively, utilizing the hack that's in my other videos, so make sure to check that out. And then you're going to want to select the lender that you are most comfortable with, whether they're the best in customer service or offering the lower rate, the lower cost, or a combination of all of those things. Now, you're going to go under contract on a property, right? You're going to want to understand what's in that contract, because there are going to be certain milestones that you need to be held accountable for, and you have to meet those milestones so that you're not putting your deposit, as I mentioned, at risk once you're under contract on the property. So it's important that you fully understand this is a legally binding contract. You're agreeing to specific terms. Once you pass the dates that are set forth in that contract, whether it be for your inspection period, your loan approval period, the closing itself, those are hard dates that are set in your contract for a reason. And as each of those falls away, those contingencies that are created by those dates are no longer in the mix. So as an example, if you had a 30-day window to get a loan approval, and now you've gone to day 31 and you never got a loan approval, you never got a loan denial, right? Weren't turned down. Any money that you put in escrow with the title company when you went under contract is now at risk if your loan were to be turned down after that loan approval period. So the point is to understand what it is you're signing in that contract. And once again, check out my video specifically on the real estate contract and understanding the different sections and the important dates within that contract, because you never want to put your money at risk when you're buying a property. Now, the biggest mistakes outside of not understanding and missing those dates that we see on contracts are things not having your legal name on the contract, a misspelling. Maybe you use your middle name as a first name, but the contract needs to have your legal first name on it. Or maybe you're a junior, a second, a third, a fourth, but the contract doesn't reference that. Those are things that are important, and those are things that we often see when it comes to the spelling or misinterpretation or representation of someone's name on that contract. You want to make sure the effective date is accurate. The effective date is the date that the last person involved, whether it be the seller or the buyer, signed that contract. You want to make sure that all of the terms are what you agreed to, right? Are you putting 20% down? Does the contract show you're putting 20% down? So everything within that contract is important to understand and review. Don't allow for mistakes to be made, and don't just sign something just because it's in front of you. A lot of times you'll be sent an electronic signature document and just click through it without reading what you're signing. Make sure to read what you're signing, because as I said, you're signing a legally binding contract with that seller. Assuming you make it through the process, everything goes well, your loan's approved, well, now it's time for closing. And what's going to happen? Well, you're going to have a walkthrough of the property with your realtor to make sure that it's still in the same condition it was in when you initially agreed to purchase it based on the terms in the contract. That walkthrough is typically done the day before or day of your closing. Then you're going to wire any funds that are still due for the transaction, whether it be their balance of your down payment or closing costs, directly to the title company so that the money's there to issue to the seller once everyone's signed and closed. Your lender, assuming you're not a cash buyer, is also going to send a wire for the funds needed from the mortgage to cover the balance. Then at closing, you're going to review and sign all of the documents, make sure it's everything that was originally agreed to when it comes to the mortgage and the terms with the seller on the property. And then after you close, you're going to want to look at filing what's known as a homestead exemption if this is your primary residence. A homestead exemption is an exemption to the property taxes on the property, but you have to occupy the home year-round. The homestead exemption is going to reduce the amount of tax you pay on the home, and it's going to reduce the amount that those taxes can increase year after year. Once you've done all that, it's time to celebrate because you're now a homeowner. So for more videos just like this one, or if you have some questions on this video specifically, make sure to comment below. I do respond to 100% of those comments, and follow me for more great real estate tips.